Hi, I'm Kurt from Kurt's Auto, and you're watching the Ripping Burnouts channel. This is my 79 Pontiac Firebird. I've owned this car for 25 years, and this is going to be part one of rebuilding this car to take on the Hot Rod Power Tour. It's currently getting ready to start being assembled again. I've done a lot of the work already, and I'm kind of taking you back in time with some of this footage to when I had my building, but over the last month and a half has been just crazy for me with selling my business and downsizing back to my home garage. I've had a lot of little things put together, and I want to start to document the entire process. So I'm starting with this video as part one, and I'm going to go through and kind of show you how I got to where I'm at and everything else that I have left to do to the car. So with that, here we go. Well, so my idea to use a used 5.3 and pretty much just put it back in. As you can see here, we are quite far into the motor now. I've got the valves pulled out. I was just going to throw valve springs on it, but then I started looking at them. There's enough carbon buildup in here that I'm going to go ahead, get them sandblasted, and just completely rebuild them. I am going to sell my machine shop. Fingers crossed on that. I hope I do. If not, I don't know where I'm going to store it, but that's a different story. I have 3 broken off exhaust bolts like every LS does. I'm going to go ahead and weld a nut on those and get them out. And I don't have a lot of time, as I only have 15 days left. Well, 17 days left as of right now before I'm supposed to be moving out. So hopefully, with any luck, these clean up really easy. The bolts come out really easy, and I can have these all put back together. In about 2 days, I should have my new valve springs and my new valve stem seals. So I'm going to have the heads rebuilt. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get them milled. And the plan is to probably take this engine home in pieces, unfortunately, and put it back together in my garage at home. Here's the block. Again, with my junkyard used rebuild. I thought I was going to spray paint it and call it good. Turns out I'm replacing every single gasket and the cam bearings because they're wiped. Same thing with my transmission. I thought this was going to be a used piece, and nope, not at all. We're going to completely have to go through and get this one completely rebuilt with all new clutch packs. So just like that, weld the bolt onto the end of your broken stud or your broken bolt, and she'll come right out for you. Probably should have waited to show you the last one because this is the first one and it came right out. So I'm sure one of the other 2 that I have to do out of the 3 will end up fighting me, but this one came out super easy. Well, the parts are finally here. I've got the new drum, I've got the Kevlar band, cam bearings, intake manifold, valve springs, the shift kit, and some transmission gaskets. I actually ended up I already took the full kit out, so I ended up with an extra set of gaskets that I wasn't sure if I was going to get them, so I just ordered another set. Not a big deal. The only thing I don't have is the valve stem seals, so I can't finish the heads today anyway. They're being shipped from Nevada. All right, well, I got my cam bearings, so we're going to throw these Durabonds in here. We're going to knock out all the cam bearings and run this through the hot tank one more time. I definitely did not like the way they looked. For where I'm at on it, it's easy enough to do. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these all popped out. But before I wash it the last time, after I've honed it, I wanted to just kind of show you the whole bottom side of the cam bearing is pure copper. And the top up here, you can actually feel with your finger, it's rough. Like the material was deposited from here to the top. I just wanted to kind of show you what the cam bearings and the reason I'm replacing them. Because obviously this was supposed to be a junkyard engine where I was just going to pop it in. Never seems to work out that way. When you open them up, you always find a problem or two. So we're going to get these taken care of, make sure this engine lasts a long time. Well, it's December 1st. It's officially December. I have 15 days to be out. Finishing up the 3-angle valve job. And we're going to pop these together, put them on the mill, and then I'm actually waiting around tonight for a guy who is possibly going to buy all my machines. Fingers crossed. I don't want to move them. I guess we'll find out probably by the time this video airs whether I had to move them or not, but somebody's supposed to be coming from out of town to look at them, and maybe he takes everything. And if that happens, this is probably the last set of cylinder heads I'll ever rebuild, which would be kind of cool if they end up on the Firebird and I keep that car forever. But all right, so it's time to put the transmission back together. I thought I'd show you the one upgrade that I did. This is out of the motorhome, which is probably would have been fine, but it's the roller clutch style, so it only has what I think it's 8 that lock it up. What I did was I went to this 34 element sprag out of a 4L80E. If I can get this clip off here while holding the camera. Oop, and I dropped the snap ring. Fun. So the difference here is instead of having 8 little points that lock it, I now have 34. Now that I finally got all my parts, I'm going to start stuffing this transmission back together. Hopefully I don't have any issues with it, but we have all new bands, all new clutches, all new gaskets and seals. So I got the cam bearings all installed, and now it is December 3rd, and I have less than 2 weeks to get everything out of this shop. I did get the machine shop sold. As far as putting this motor together, I'm going to probably get the pistons, crank, and rod short block put together and throw it in a plastic bag, and we are going to finish building this engine in my home garage, because I still don't even have the transmission put together yet, which I'm really close. All I have to do is finish going through the front pump. I do have all the clutches installed, all the spacing is set properly, the bands are in. Basically all I have left to do is the valve body modifications, put in the front pump and tail shaft and all that stuff. So I'm super far behind, and I do not have time to finish this car with trying to move all of this stuff. But the crankshaft is in and bolted in. Sorry, the camera there. As you can see, floats nice and smooth. The bearing surfaces here, this crank should have been polished. I should have taken it to the machine shop and polished it. It's not going to hurt anything, but there is not the best look on those bearings. There's nothing that you can feel, and I am reusing the bearings that came out of it, which look fine. So that's just going to be there. I'm not worried about it. I'm going to finish putting it back together, and we're going to get it out of here. All right, well, here it is. The first of many packages has arrived for the Firebird. I'm going to pop it open and see what parts came. All right, so I'm going to start going through it here and see what we got. These things didn't work too good. They're all flat. Looks like we got lifters, my head bolts, 2 sets of those, timing chain, push rods, the Truck Norris. The bigger of the 2 Truck Norrises. This one does require springs because it's got the 553 lift. They make one that's got you'd have to look at 540 something lift, and you don't have to replace the springs, but I had already taken the heads apart and put springs on it, so that's the cam I bought. Here's the MSD for the LS. We've got some pretty heavy duty head gaskets here. They're the metal shim ones from Summit. I'm gonna give these a try. They should more than be capable of holding a relatively stock motor. Some valve cover gaskets, and what is in this box? Oh, there's my rocker arms. So these are the upgraded rocker arms that have roller bearings. First thing I'm gonna do is make sure that my cam likes my new cam bearings and that it turns smoothly. I did put cam bearings in this motor. They went in okay. I had a little difficulty with one, and I had to clean it up a little bit, but before I do anything else, I'm gonna make sure that the cam floats real nice in the bearings. And in case I have to do something different, fix it, this is where we're gonna start. Slide it in here. First two are perfect. First three feel perfect. You gotta be really careful when you're doing this that you don't gouge a bearing. First four bearings float absolutely perfect. You gotta get to the last one here, which it's nice about these LS's is there's no frost plug in the back of the block, so you can actually reach through and grab the cam from the back, and oh yeah. So let me turn it so I can show you. I don't have a ton of room in here. There's no oil or anything on the cam. I just put it in dry to check the fit of the bearing. But as you can see, it floats absolutely smooth. There's no effort. And these bearings are gonna be perfect. So now I gotta carefully get the cam back out. Because before I install that cam, I'm gonna make sure I have a lot of cam lube on those bearings. And that I actually clean it. Because they have some kind of packaging material, oil on it, I'm assuming, to keep it from rusting. So I'm gonna spray it all off with brake clean, make sure it's totally clean. And lube up the bearings as I put it in. But my camshaft fits perfect. And there we go, we got the Truck Norris. Well, of course, I shut the camera off and then I decided to flip it right side up here. Let me just show you. So I got the engine right side up in the stand. Except for, of course, I forgot that I had put oil in the pistons upside down before I put the bag on it, just so that the pins got lubricated, and I made a huge mess on my floor. So that was awesome. All right, so I got a thing of engine lube with my camshaft totally dry and clean. We're gonna start putting some lube on the bearing journals. I'm just gonna paint all the way around it. I'm gonna hit the peaks of the cam lobes. I'll put that in on the lifters too. Okay, so with that, we're going to start to stick the cam in. Just make sure it floats nice. Get that lube to cover the entire journal as best we can. Very carefully, without nicking the bearings, slide it into the next one, just like that. Camshaft's installed. Next thing we're gonna do is throw the cam plate on the front here and get the timing chain on it. All right, and with my bolts all hand tightened, we're gonna take them to 18 foot-pounds for the torque. And that's all they're supposed to be. All right, so I got my keyway off to the side here. It's in about this direction. Makes the dot straight up and number 1 at top dead center. We're gonna throw the chain and the gear. Well, actually, let's put the gear just like this. And then you got a dot here that you need to make sure lines up on the bottom here. Should looks like one tooth off. There's perfect. And we're gonna stick it on there just like that. Well, it took a little looking, but I found my bottle of Loctite, and so we're gonna go ahead and put a drip on all 3 of these bolts and get this tightened up to 25 foot-pounds. And the timing chain will be installed. So I've decided I'm gonna go ahead and get my lifters installed. So before I put them in, you can actually see the air bubbles coming out of the lifters. I'm not gonna pump them up, but I am gonna fill them with oil. I've completely submerged them
and I'm gonna let them soak for a little while before I go to install them. What I'm using here is a 5W40 from Royal Purple. Suck them in the retainer here, and now I'm gonna go through and put a drip of the high pressure lubricant, which is on my counter right here. And we're gonna go through, add a drop of that to all the wheels, and we're gonna stick them in the holes, and lifters will be installed. All right, got all my lifters in and lubricated. The retainers are torqued down. Next, we're gonna put in the cylinder heads. So what I went with here were Summit brand multi-layer steel shim gaskets. This is a 3-piece gasket. It's got a little bit of a seal around the combustion chamber and around the edges, and a thicker steel core in the center with 2 thinner sheets on the outside. They're marked front and rear, so you want to make sure you get them in the right direction. I've got my cylinder heads that I completely rebuilt. It's got the brand new Brian Tooley valve springs, and I trimmed, I think, 15 thousandths off of them, so it should bump the compression just a tad. And we're gonna go ahead and get the cylinder heads bolted on and all torqued down. All right, well, I got both cylinder heads installed on the motor. Now it's time to torque them. We're gonna take the bolts and torque them in sequence. We're gonna start with 22 foot-pounds. We're gonna go through, hit all of them at 90 degrees. We're gonna go back through and hit the middle 3 up here, which were the longer bolts, and the outside bolts to 90 degrees. And then the outside 2 up here get turned to 50. Then we'll go across the top and tighten up these upper ones to 22 foot-pounds, and we're done. So I'm gonna go ahead and get both cylinder heads torqued on here, and we'll start putting rocker arms on it. When it comes to torquing the head bolts down, they're torque to yield. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna turn them 90 degrees. 90 degrees is pretty easy to figure out. The 50 degrees for these ones, a little bit harder to judge by eye. So you got a couple of options. This tool, which is basically a socket extension that has a little dial on it, and you can set it up, clamp it to here, put it on your torque wrench, and it'll tell you how far you've turned the bolt. This is the old school way of doing it. I've had this tool forever. They came out with electronic torque wrenches that will actually do it for you. So this is a snap-on. See if the batteries are warming up in my cold garage here. You have to leave it completely still in order for it to calibrate. But as you can see here, I can dial in however many degrees I want, and the torque wrench will keep track of it automatically and beep and shake my hand when I get to the 90 degrees. It's pretty close to straight with the head. It's a little above, so we should stop a little bit before this bolt. And as we come down to here, like magic, it figures out exactly where 90 degrees is. So I'm gonna go through and hit all of them, and then the heads will be torqued. Cylinder heads are torqued on. The next step is going to be to install the push rods and rocker arms. To show you what I got that, this is the difference. So a stock rocker arm basically has this small area that can rotate against there. These are upgraded, and so the pin size is so much larger that turns. So there's much more surface area in there, and it's a roller bearing instead of a, I'm not sure what this is. I think it's like a bronze bushing. But yeah, that's the upgrade that I put in the rocker arms. And you can buy just bearings and pins and do it yourself, but that seemed like a whole lot of messing around. So I went ahead and I just ordered a set of them. So we got these soaking in oil, like so, and we're gonna get them installed. You should be able to see this, but the surface on this looks great, but on this one, it's kind of got a line on it where it was worn, and it was wearing the head of the push rod uneven, and the ball socket of the rocker arm was getting that same wear. So what I did was, I already showed you the rocker arms. I also bought a pack of new push rods, and so we're going to upgrade these with the hardened push rod. All right, just like that, I've got all of the rocker arms torqued, and now we're going to go ahead and throw the valve covers on. Well, pretty awesome. My car radio came for the Firebird. It's a cheap Chinese Android radio, but I was more after the GPS system rather than the quality of sound. And what we got out of this is a massive 10.1 inch screen. So here's the radio. I chose this one because I like the fact that it had a volume knob on the screen. Sometimes it's hard to get the touch screen to work right away. So if you want to turn it down really quick, I like the fact that there's an on-off button and a knob for volume. That was the reason I chose this one. But it's a 10.1. The screen's adjustable. It should be able to slide up and down and right and left. Boy, it takes a lot of force to move, which I guess is good because you don't want it bouncing around. But we're going to get this mounted up and figure out how it's going to fit in my dash. This is my current dashboard, which has got the wood grain finish on the metal dash here. And I had put these 3 gauges in it, which were just generic Sun Pros. I do have the Pro Comp odometer, tachometer, and speedometer. And I left the factory fuel gauge out of the original instrument cluster. However, I personally like the brushed metal, or the turned metal, I should say, dash that came out of the Trans Ams. And it has 4 gauges instead of 3. So what I decided to do is I'm going to recycle these into my S10 because I don't really care if there's a little bit of rust on them and they don't look perfect in that truck. And for this one, because I have an extra gauge hole, I have gone with a voltmeter, a water temperature, and I'm going to put an air-fuel ratio gauge in. And I also have a new oil pressure gauge coming. All right, well, I got the car up in the air, and we're going to attempt to put the 400 turbo underneath the bottom of the car. My transmission jack is about 3 foot tall, and my transmission's 1.5 inches. From here to the ground is a 4 foot 4 inches, so I'm about an inch too tall to fit underneath the cross member. So it's going to make it interesting. I'm going to have to kind of sneak it through here, I think. And then this bar, which is part of my lift, is definitely going to give me trouble because it's literally going to be right in the way of the tranny jack. However, once I get to here, I can slide the transmission onto this. I'll figure it out. First fun part is I got to pick that thing up and set it on top of my jack. And then we'll see how much fun it is to get it underneath the car. I'm going to see if I can pick this big thing up and set it up on top of this stand, or on top of this jack. Probably going to regret this in the morning, as these transmissions aren't very light. Yep. A little heavy, not a big deal. All right. I got to crook it here. So, kind of do this just for safety, because my garage floor's got huge cracks in it. I don't want it to fall off in the process of getting it under there. So this is the clearance I have. I managed to get the bell housing to fit through that little part there. Now I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to get it to fit in there all the way, but so far so good. All right, see how we can get it in here. I did go ahead and put in my last connector here. This was the final piece I was waiting for on the kickdown switch. I broke it right before I put the transmission together, and I had to order a new one. That was the only thing I had left, so I just put through that in, and we're gonna see how this is gonna work. Well, as you've guessed, since I speeded the tape up, didn't work very well. Transmission's a little too large to fit past the bar on the new lift, so I had to rethink this whole process. That still doesn't do it justice. Pop you off the stand. All right, so here's my problem. Bell housing is going to hit the frame there. It is already hitting the body there. I can't really come any more further this way because I'm going to hit the frame here. I have to get this on top of this. I don't know. I'm going to have to figure this out. This is not looking like fun. Alright. So I don't get that thumbnail of my transmission collapsing onto the ground. I've got a strap here that I plan to wrap this way. Loosen this guy up. Don't necessarily have to take it off. Well, yeah, actually I do. From here. And it doesn't matter anyway because the transmission's bolted, so it can't fall out. The worst that could happen is it could slip down and hit this bar again, but I'm not concerned. We're gonna go ahead and get the get my transmission lines out on top of the transmission and jack it up. All right. Besides the not so much fun that was, wasn't all that bad. We're gonna get a block of wood. That one's too big. I'm gonna go find a block of wood. All right. That is in the car-ish. Well, I went ahead and I threw my drive shaft in, and I said I replaced this plug that I had broke. I did it without taking the pan off because I had a little piece of wire holding on to the wire on the inside, and so I just popped it in. Well, I have the transmission in park, and unfortunately, I think when I did that, it messed up my parking pin because I can hear it clicking. And I think my park lever must have something is wrapped around that wire. I don't know. I know I checked it when I put it together and park worked, but park does not work currently. So, even though I got away without taking the pan off to put the little switch in, or the connector in, I got to take the pan back off anyway because something screwed up with the parking pin. So, better to find out now than have it roll down the road, right? So, maybe it's a good thing it happened now. Well, I guess I don't know what's wrong with it. Let's take it apart and find out. Well, I just pulled the pan off, and here's the wire I thought that might have been getting hit, and it's not. So I got to figure out why the parking pin isn't engaging when I'm in park. Actually, why is that not working then? I'm gonna have to get a better light in here. Well, it turns out I put everything together correctly. The problem is up in there on the parking paw, there's rust where the pin that it pivots off. This transmission had some rust in it, which is why I completely rebuilt it. I was planning on just using it as a used transmission. It turned out that it was no good inside. But what's happening is when the parking rod pushes on it, this part's sticking and it's not floating like it should. Probably because this has been sitting now without having fluid in it, and there was rust on it anyway. So I'm gonna have to spray some kind of lubricant up in there and get that worked back and forth to make sure that that doesn't stick on me again. But it should work correctly once I get that lubricated. Well, definitely wasn't expecting that to be a problem, but I took it all apart here, and so you can see the levers moving now. So we should have park again. I think, yeah, the fact that it was sitting for a while, there's just a little bit of rust in there. Hopefully that little bit of lubricant's all it takes, and we should have a good parking pin. All right, yeah, so floats nice and smooth. Doing exactly what it's supposed to do. A little bit of rust was causing my issue. So we now have park, and at least now I can double check this wire and see that it isn't going to hit anything. I really thought that when I pushed this in, I somehow got this screwed up, but it was just rust on the parking pin itself, or the parking paw. But it's working exactly how it should. I can turn the drive shaft a little bit, and then we can put it back in park, and you'll see it'll click right into park. If I can turn it here, I need a screwdriver. Oops. All right, so if I turn the drive shaft a little bit, click, locks right into park. So that is finally fixed. The transmission I expected to take a whole 15-20 minutes to put in. It's now almost midnight, and this whole thing took several hours. All right, so yeah, this piece of billet aluminum is going to go and cover up the valley pan, as opposed to the cast aluminum piece that the knock sensors screw it into here, and so there was a hole for the wire to come down and attach to the knock sensor. And for the cost of the rubber seals down here, because I already had this gasket, this plate was almost the same price as what the seals would have cost. And then with the hole in the hood, I was afraid rainwater or just water from washing the car would have got down into the knock sensor hole and just filled that up with water, and there's no point to having it in there. So I went ahead and I got this billet piece of aluminum, and we're gonna get it all sealed up. Now all I'm waiting on is the new low profile oil pan and the bushing for the crankshaft to the torque converter. These are the motor mounts here. All right, so what I did was I went ahead and I got these plain steel mounts. They were pretty cheap off eBay. I figure the amount of work it is to cut out this piece of steel and these pieces, it's not worth me trying to fabricate it from scratch. So I went ahead and I bought these, and what I'm gonna have to do is cut it off and make it wider to fit my motor mounts in here. I'm pretty sure that this is gonna be too narrow to fit on that mount that's mounted there, and so I'm gonna have to cut and modify these. But like I said, starting from scratch with a piece of just plate steel and trying to cut all these things out with the plasma cutter, I think 25, 30 bucks. Actually, I don't even think they were that much. I think, yeah, they were like 25 bucks shipped and delivered. So all I should have to do is just remove one of the tabs and move it whichever way I have to go. And then I should, in theory, be able to drop this motor in this car without too much problem. And I believe this is my oil pan. Got my plate mounted on top of the engine, all torqued down. Went to put the intake on. Turns out I got the wrong intake gaskets. They were about half the size. I don't know what's going on there. I'll have to look up the part number again, but I cross-referenced into the part number I got and it's wrong. But I'm gonna open this oil pan up and check it out. Should be way lower profile from this, just judging from the box. So I'm gonna get it open. All right, so this is what comes in the box. This is just an eBay oil pan that's a 6-quart for a LS swap. I probably have a Fel-Pro gasket that I'm probably going to use instead of this one, but it actually doesn't seem like it's too bad a quality. We have a pickup tube, which is needed to make the new oil pan work. And inside the box, we have our hardware. And here is the swap oil pan. Actually, I'm going to unwrap it and I'll put it up next to this one so you can see the difference in the height. Alright, so here's the new pan. It's got like a polished metal plate on the inside for windage tray. And comparing it to the truck oil pan, there's quite a difference. It's probably, well, 2.5 inches, I'd say. All right, so this is the pickup tube for my cheap oil pan. And I don't know if you can see the gold flakes right there on my finger. I just sprayed this all out with brake clean, but I could feel like a roughness in here. And I can actually scrape some of the anodized coating or whatever coating they put on this metal. And I got some of this stuff to flake off. So buyer beware. I'm going to probably run a wire brush through the inside of this as far as I can and get in there with the bore scope and make sure that I don't see anything else coming off. But yeah, right on the edge, I was actually able to scrape some of the coating that had built up on the edge. Yeah, you can see it right there pretty good. Well, I'm gonna get some more off and I'll show you in a second. Well, I tried to scrape a little bit at it. There's like one little flake on the cap here. But yeah, I was able to get a chunk of it to come off in my finger. You can see a little bit more on the screwdriver there. So these cheap oil pans, I don't know. The other problem, I kind of test fitted it, which I'm gonna have to look inside and make sure nothing fell in my pump. With this sitting on here, it does line up kind of, but you can see it's kind of rocking off the windage tray. So I'm gonna have to clearance this right here to make the pickup tube fit. So it does actually hit the factory windage tray. I'm not even sure if the oil pan clears this yet. I'll have to try and find that out, but this is my first look at this new oil pan. Sitting here flush, it sticks way out of the hole. So I'm gonna definitely have to probably cut or modify this portion of the tray here. Well, so just after finding this great news about how it doesn't fit, and I showed you how I had this one loose, and I had this one sitting right there, it dropped in there. Hoping it's inside the piston. Oh, yeah. Always make sure you pay attention where you set your bolts, because that could have been an absolute disaster had I not realized that I just dropped that inside my engine. Alright, so this is the first test fit, and for sure you can see the pickup tube
is actually holding the oil pan off. So I do have to take and cut this section of the windage tray out of there in order to get the oil or the pickup tube to sit down a little bit lower and be able to put the oil pan on. So, well, so I pulled the tube out and I am actually hitting pretty hard on the front up here. It looks like I may have to remove the whole front half of the windage tray. Yeah, I might not even be able to run this tray with this oil pan, which, I mean, it does have that one back there for a little bit of a splash guard, but that's not quite as good as having the scraper on here. All kinds of surprises, aren't we? Well, that's what happens with anything you're doing custom. You're always going to have to modify something. All right, so I think I did it. I'm down all the way. The windage tray here, I cut the whole front section off, so it fits up into that spot right there. It should clear. Next step is going to be to put the pickup tube in there and make sure the pickup tube clears everything, because I cut this part out here and then I came all the way across and cut that out. Should fit perfect. Clearance out right there. I don't have this bolted in at all, but this is sitting nice and flush, and does hit almost right there, but it clears, so I'm gonna run it. All right, I got it all sealed up. I went ahead and I primed the pump with oil, cranked it over a few times and sucked some oil through it. I got the pan gasket all torqued in. Should work great. All I have to do now is, well, I'm going to order a new one of these. I ordered this spacer, which would allow me to use the Turbo 400 behind the LS, and I got it, and I am not happy with the fit. It's loose. It's loose in the crank, and, well, it's loose on the converter. This part here sits on the converter, and it's got about just as much play on the converter as it does on the crank. So my fear is that, one, it's not going to perfectly align it, and two, it's going to be floating around in there just a little loose, and at high RPM vibrating around. I don't want this part rattling. So I know they make a adapter that bolts onto the back. You put longer bolts in, and it actually it bolts on, versus this one that just kind of sits in between there. The engine's pretty much built, with the exception of the intake manifold gaskets were wrong, so I need to order new ones of those. The little gaskets that go for the crossover tube that runs underneath the intake for the coolant, I still have to put that on. Yeah, and then that flywheel, I want to get that different hub. So probably I'm not going to get those parts before I leave for sick week. So we're going to have a couple weeks off that I'll be in Florida. But when I come back, I'll finish ordering the parts, and we're going to be dropping this motor in this car.